Bill Maher thought he could shrug off the criticism for showing up at a Trump rally until Jasmine Crockett calmly explained why that visit was far from harmless. The studio lights were a little too intense, that same feeling you get when something is about to go sideways inside the cramped but packed set of Real Time with Bill Maher in Burbank. The audience was warming up, scattered laughter filling the road, not realizing that the moment they would remember was not found in any punchline. It was in the quiet tension building under the surface. Jasmine Crockett sat at the far right of the panel, legs crossed, pen lightly tapping on a cue card resting in her lap. She did not demand attention with flair, but held it anyway without trying. No loud gestures, no theatrics, just a grounded focus. She was no stranger to tough conversations, but she never chased them. She never had to. Meanwhile, Bill Maher was enjoying the buzz. Fresh off his appearance at a Trump rally in Bakersfield, the media had been circling all week, not because he supported Trump, he claimed he did not, and kept repeating it, but because he showed up, stood in the crowd, laughed along, even clapped. When asked, he called it a comedic outing. Pressed further, he stood firm. "People are making too big a deal," he said in a preview clip that morning. "You cannot fix the country without talking to everyone, even those who watch Fox and wear red caps. They're more fun sometimes." That comment had already caused a stir online. Some hailed it as bold, others called it tone deaf. But inside the studio, the firestorm had not landed yet. It was just simmering, waiting. The panel was diverse. A speedy tech founder from San Diego, a best-selling Vermont author who liked quoting herself, and a political advisor from Tallahassee, still trying to finish her sentence from last week. But all eyes were on Jasmine. Bill leaned back in his usual posture, one leg crossed, mug in hand. "Tonight's outrage target appears to be me," he grinned. The audience gave a light and certain laugh. "I attended a Trump rally," he continued, "not because I support him, clearly, but because I want to understand the chaos, the sides, the merchandise stands, all of it. This is a comedy show, a loyalty of." The room chuckled again. Jasmine remained still. She waited. He turned toward her. "Congresswoman Crockett, I'm sure you have thoughts." That was Maher's style, poke the bear. But this bear did not growl. She calmly adjusted her mic. "I do," Jasmine said, plain, locking eyes with him. "But let's be precise, this is not about comedy or souvenirs. It is about the consequences of lending credibility to places that openly oppose other people's rights." Her voice was level, no rise, no performance, just a line that sliced through the air. Bill arched a brow. "Isn't that a bit extreme?" She did not look away. "Do you think so?" He let out a laugh. "Look, I've always said left or right comedy is survival. We cannot act like talking across lines is betrayal." Jasmine folded her hands. "But you were not just talking," she replied. "You were laughing, with people cheering for some truly hateful things. You stood there while someone shouted, 'Go back to where you came from,' at a reporter. That was not a joke. That was hate." The laughter stopped. The silence hit quickly and sharply, like the whole room had leaned in a bit, even if they had not meant to. For once, Bill looked down. He had nothing quick to throw back. But the moment was far from over, because Jasmine had not even shared the story that would shift the whole conversation. Bill adjusted in his seat, clearly surprised by how fast the tone had changed. He gave a half smile, the kind used to lighten a room. "Okay," he said. "So now I'm being blamed for what random people yell at rallies?" He laughed, but no one joined him. "Look, I'm not defending that kind of behavior," he added. "But come on, if I cannot even attend a Trump rally without being labeled disloyal, then how are we ever supposed to fix things?" Jasmine did not cut him off. She let him talk. That was her approach: let people speak, let the flaws show, and then step in. And when she did, there was no sarcasm, just something sharper. "I do not think anyone called you disloyal, Bill," she said, looking him directly in the eyes. "What I am saying is that when you walk into spaces where people cheer for harmful policies, and you laugh along, even as a comic, you are sending a message that what happens there is not that serious, that the damage is not real." He opened his mouth to respond, but she gently raised a finger and kept going. You can call it a comedy experiment, but you did not leave that rally telling the crowd hard truths. You laughed at their jokes, then used your show to smooth it over. The panel stayed silent. The tech guy stopped clicking his pen. The strategist leaned back. Even the author from Vermont had nothing to say. Bill let out a breath. But let's not pretend I stood there yelling slurs, he said. I was just watching. I have always done that, go into the heat, then come back and talk about it. And who gets burned in that heat? Jasmine asked. He looked at her, confused. What do you mean? I mean the people who cannot afford to treat it like a segment, she said. The people who do not sit on talk shows and laugh it off after the cameras are off. The people who hear those same messages at rallies, and they do not stop once the flags come down. She shifted slightly toward the crowd, not for effect, but because they needed to hear it too. I represent people in South Dallas, she said, who have been threatened just for putting up a campaign sign. I have constituents who were followed, screamed at, kicked out of stores, all because someone assumed they were the enemy. That kind of hate does not appear on its own. It is fed. It is allowed. And when people with platforms walk into those spaces and call it a field trip, it sends a message that those fears are made up. Bill leaned back. So you're saying cannot go anywhere? I am saying that if you go, take responsibility for what that means, she replied. If you want to be an observer, fine. But if you see fire, you have to say so. You cannot warm your hands at it and then act surprised when others get hurt. A ripple went through the room. Even the crew upstairs had gone quiet. Bill leaned forward. The joke's now gone. You really think I made it worse by being there? She paused briefly, then answered. I think you made it easier for people to pretend it was not that serious. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. But it landed. For the first time that night, Bill Maher looked like he was actually rethinking his words. And that, more than anything, made the audience lean in closer. But Jasmine was not finished, because what she said next would bring everything to a full stop. Jasmine rested her hands in her lap. She did not need to raise her voice. The studio was already still, not because someone told them to be, but because something had clearly shifted. There is this kid I met in Fort Worth, she said. 17 years old. Bright kid. Honors classes. Wants to study environmental law. He told me he does not speak up in class anymore. Said he once questioned something his teacher said about immigration, and the next day, a classmate slipped a note into his locker. It just said, go back. That was it. She let the words hang there. That teacher never said anything clearly racist, she continued. But he created an environment where a student felt comfortable doing that. And my student, he was not shocked. He just stopped speaking. Bill looked like he wanted to respond, but Jasmine kept going. When I asked why he never reported it, she said, he just shrugged and said, what is the point? They would probably say took it the wrong way. A soft murmur passed through the audience. Not laughter, not clapping, just people taking it in. That is what I mean when I talk about platforming, she said. It is not just about what you say. It is about what your presence allows others to feel okay doing. Bill leaned back again, clearly uneasy, and not the usual kind he puts on for laughs. This was not part of the act. He looked stuck somewhere, between being defensive and starting to understand. But do you not think, he began slowly, that sometimes people take things too personally? I mean, people say stuff. Sometimes they do not even mean it. Can we not just ignore it? Instead of always assuming the worst? She raised an eyebrow. You want teenagers to just ignore it when they are told to leave the country? He had no answer. She leaned forward just slightly. What if it was your nephew, your goddaughter? What if they were told that not because they did anything wrong, but because someone in power made it seem okay to treat them like that? The strategist on the panel shifted awkwardly. The author took a long sip of her water. No one else said anything. Bill tried again. Look, I know there are serious problems. I do, but I am not in government. I am not making laws. I tell jokes. I try to call out both sides when I see hypocrisy. And you do, she replied. At times. But you cannot avoid the consequences just because you label it comedy. We all decide where we show up, who we stand beside, and what we say later. Those decisions carry weight. He looked at her, not angry, more like someone trying to understand a new point. The audience was no longer watching an argument. They were watching someone slowly realize what it means to be held responsible by someone who knows the reality firsthand. Jasmine leaned back into her seat, her voice calm. You know what is most dangerous about all this? It is not just the hate. It is the people who do not see it as hate, the ones who dismiss it, the ones who go to rallies, hear the things said, and leave thinking it was just loud music and silly signs. She looked back at Bill. You are smart. You know better. That is why this matters. He did not joke. He did not push back. He just looked at her, and for the first time, it seemed like he was actually listening. But just as the room began to settle into that silence, Bill made one last move to take the reins back, and it would only make things worse. Bill leaned forward, fingers pressed together, elbows on the desk. His voice softened as if he believed tone might save what content could not. Jasmine, he began, you're making some strong points. You really are. But do you not think that sometimes, just sometimes, this outrage feels a bit staged? Like, not every situation is a 5-alarm emergency? The audience did not laugh. A few people shifted awkwardly in their chairs. Jasmine did not jump in. She took a pause, and when she finally spoke, her words were no longer aimed at the panel. They were meant for the people watching, those listening later, maybe during lunch or on their way home from work. You want to talk about performance? She asked. Let's talk about what it feels like to be followed around a grocery store with your baby sitting in the cart, while someone walks behind you, quietly asking if you are on food stamps. Her voice stayed steady, but it tightened. That happened to my sister in Midland. Middle of the day. She did not go viral. She was just humiliated. Then she bought milk and went home like it was normal. Bill opened his mouth to respond, then stopped. This is not about huge, explosive moments, she said. It is about the slow burn people deal with every single day. And when someone with your kind of reach steps into that environment as a spectator and leaves without saying what it really is, you're not being neutral. You're just staying quiet when it matters most. The crowd remained still. Even the camera operator took a step back, almost like giving space for what was coming. You have built an entire platform on exposing double standards, she said. Fine. But those contradictions are not just in the safe zones on the left. They show up in red hat slogans, in coded language, and in the way someone like you can laugh at all the chaos, then get praised as courageous just for being there. She paused, then asked plainly, who benefits from that kind of bravery? Bill finally sat upright. So what, am I just supposed to stay in my own circle? Only speak to people I already agree with? That is exactly how we got stuck in this mess. Jasmine smiled for the first time that night, but it was not smug. It was the kind of smile you give when someone still does not quite get it. No one's saying don't go, she replied. Go wherever you want. Just don't act like showing up means you're neutral. And do not pretend your silence while you're there does not carry weight after you leave. There was something heavy in her tone. Not angry, just clear. She looked toward the audience again. Here is what most people will not say on shows like this, she continued. Some of you are so used to being the center that the moment someone asks you to look from the edge, it feels like you are being attacked. A few quiet gasps came from the crowd. Not from shock, but from recognition. Bill looked over to his producers. Not panicked, more like someone stalling for a response. Jasmine stayed focused. We are not asking for sympathy, she said. We are asking for truth. When you choose where to stand, be honest about what is behind you, because someone is always watching. The strategist nodded slowly. The author gently set her glass down. Bill looked drained, not physically, but in that quiet way people look when they realize they are on the wrong side of a moment and cannot joke their way out. The audience did not clap, at least not yet. They were still sitting with it, still letting it land. But in the seconds that followed, something began to shift. And Jasmine was about to deliver the line that no one in that room would forget. Jasmine looked toward the audience, not for praise, not to make a point, just to check if they were still with her. They were. She leaned forward a bit, calm as always, and looked Bill directly in the eye. You have built a career saying things others are too afraid to say, she began. Her voice was calm, steady. "But the truth is the most noticeable thing you said this week was nothing." A moment passed, then another. No one made a move. Even Bill stayed silent. "You stood on that rally floor," she continued, "as people yelled about stolen elections and what it means to be a real American. You heard comments that were not just politically different, they were mean. But you said nothing. You called it a comedy safari. You used your show to downplay it, to tell people it was not as serious as it looked." She let that sit. "Do you know how many people watched that and said, 'See, even Bill Maher understands us. Even he thinks we're okay'?" They pointed to you, Bill. You became the evidence someone else needed. That was the moment the audience shifted. A woman in the third row, retired teacher from Fresno, hands resting in her lap, nodded slowly. A man in the back leaned in, arms on his knees. Even the stage crew, used to noise and chatter, went still. Bill lowered his eyes. Jasmine leaned back, not smug, just certain. "I'm not here to cancel you," she said. "I'm here to remind you your words carry weight, and so does your silence. You don't have to walk beside extremists to help their cause. Sometimes just acting like they are not dangerous is enough." He looked up. There was no sharp reply. The author on the panel turned to Jasmine. "I have to admit, I had not looked at it that way," she said. The strategist added, "This is not even about politics now, it's about owning your influence." Bill breathed out through his nose. Not irritated, just quiet. Then softly, almost under his breath, he said, "I hear you, no drama, no music, no clash, just 3 simple words." But the way he said them, you could tell he was not shutting down. He was taking it in. Then came a sound, a slow clap, not mocking. One person in the middle row, then another. A few more joined in. No one stood. No one cheered. Just quiet, real applause, like they weren't sure they should, but could not hold back. Jasmine did not smile. That was not why she was there. She gave one steady nod, then looked back to Bill. "I hope that when you talk about this moment on your next episode," she said, "you do not just say, 'Well, not called out by a congresswoman.' I hope you say, 'I listened.'" The lights were the same. The cameras were still running, but everything felt different now. Bill glanced at the side monitor, watching the delayed shot of himself on screen. Then he turned back to Jasmine. "You are brave," he said. "I will give you this." She did not respond. She did not have to. But outside that studio, the internet was already buzzing, and the moment was about to blow up. The clip hit social media. Before the credits even stopped rolling, someone in the audience had recorded the whole exchange on their phone. The video was a little shaky, but the sound was crystal clear. It started with Bill Maher leaning back, then cut to Jasmine Crockett's line, "You do not have to march with extremists to help them." Within minutes, it was on X, Instagram, TikTok. One caption read, "Jasmine Crockett just took down Bill Maher on his own show. Calm, clear, real." It was reposted, re-edited, slowed down, turned into clips and quotes, mixed with protest footage, school board meetings, and people watching from their homes. Some versions showed families shopping for groceries. Others added gentle piano music. Her voice had left the studio and found its way into places she had never even visited. On the Monday after the episode aired, Maher opened his podcast differently. Not with an apology, but in a more careful tone. "Congresswoman Crockett gave me a lot to think about," he said. "I did not agree with everything, but I understood her, and I understand why people connected to it. It was not an easy talk," he added. "But maybe that is exactly the point." He did not joke about it. He did not turn it into sarcasm. And for a lot of people that was the biggest surprise. Online, reactions were split as usual. Some called Jasmine the new voice of reason, a steady hand in the middle of the noise. Others, as expected, called her names. Too soft, too dramatic, too much. But something stayed. Later in the week, a video showed up, a teacher in Missouri playing the clip for her high school civics class. Then she asked, "What does it mean to speak without yelling?" One student answered, "It means no one can say you were being emotional, just honest." In Austin, small business owner posted a video saying, "I have watched Bill Maher for years, but last night was the first time someone on that show really spoke for people like me." Jasmine never made a big deal about it. She shared a few clips, thanked her followers, and went straight back to her work. During an interview on Thursday, a reporter asked her if she would return to the show. She smiled and replied, "If they invite me, sure, but I'm not here to win debates on TV. My job," she added, "is to make sure people who never get the mix still get their voices heard." There was something in the way she said it, plain, honest, and unpolished, real enough to make the host pause his writing for a moment. That was Jasmine Crockett's strength. She did not show up yelling. She did not try to overpower anyone with noise. She spoke with clarity. She spoke the truth. And she made it so simple that even people who did not want to hear it could not act like they had not. Sometimes, the strongest mic drop is not a loud hit. It is just a quiet fact, spoken with enough belief that no one can look away. And sometimes, the biggest change happens not when someone shouts, but when someone truly listens. That night on TV was not about picking sides. It was not about scoring points in a debate. It marked a clear line, a line between show and responsibility, between just being there and actually showing up, between seeing damage and choosing not to ignore it. We live in a time where saying it is not that serious is easy, but sometimes it really is, and how you behave in those times shows everyone exactly what you stand for. If this moment meant something to you, share it, talk about it, and remember, the loudest voice is not always shouting. Sometimes, it is the one that speaks honestly, without ever yelling. Subscribe for more stories that push past comfort, challenge silence, and leave something real behind.